Hey everybody, it's Fox with FoxeoGames, and this is a Fox first sent of NieR Automata for the PlayStation 4, the demo that is available right now as of the release of this video. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I haven't actually heard it pronounced yet, I've just read about it. Make sure to follow me on Twitter if you haven't already, where you can get all of my insightful and witty commentary there, as well as on gab.ai. If you haven't heard of that yet, it's brand new as of this year. Anyway, NieR Automata is essentially at least a spiritual successor to NieR. I'm not sure how related it is. When you start out in the demo, you are not playing as the main protagonist from the original NieR, but as a female character named 2B. Yes, 2, the number 2, and then the letter B. So 2B, or maybe not 2B. Who knows? Sorry, that's a terribly stupid pun. Anyway, the demo starts out on a pretty high note. This is very obviously, in many ways, a Platinum Games game. That's the essentially the developer of the game. Now, Platinum Games has a very unique style to it. They're pretty good at making these sort of flashy, very visually entertaining hack and slash action games. Now, in this case, I would have to say that in typical fashion, they've got one of their key flaws. In my opinion, it's a flaw in their design, is that the flashier, the bigger, more visually interesting components of fights are oftentimes fairly automated, although there were no actual QTEs in this QuickTime events. Thank goodness. So hopefully there are no QTEs in the entirety of the game, but a lot of times if something really cool happens, your character simply takes control and does it. That was certainly the case in Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, if I got that name right. And that's something I don't like. I like having control of the character. So here you generally have control of your character most of the time. It's basically a hack and slash game, and you do have a dodge ability, although there do tend to be some pretty wide iframes on that, invincibility frames, where as long as you hit the dodge button relatively close to the time that the attack is coming, it does appear that you do this sort of unique dodge animation where there's sort of like a leftover phantom image of your character. It almost looks like you split in some sort of magical fashion and don't take damage. You can jump all over the place and have good control of your character. It looks like you have a bit more control than you did in NieR, to my recollection, but there are invisible walls, as you'll see here in just a moment. When I try to jump over the side here, yeah, you can't. Also, notice that a lot of the textures are exceedingly simple. Most of them background textures, which is not a big deal because you generally won't be staring at them. But for sure, some of these textures look like something you might see on like a PlayStation 3 or a much simpler game than what you would expect here. However, if that's the sacrifice that needs to be made to get the 60 frames per second gameplay, then I will gladly take that sacrifice, because I'd much rather have 60 frames per second and downgraded visuals than upgraded visuals and a lame 30 frames per second, which just does not do. It just does not do for action games. Now, it's fine for a lot of other games that don't require much action or input, you know, simple JRPGs and things, but this is an action game, so we need 60 frames per second. Some of my thoughts on it: well, the 60 FPS is not consistent, as we would expect. There do appear to be some drops, or at least some frame timing issues. However, it's consistent enough of the time that I do appreciate having it, and it's always nice to play in 60 versus 30, even if it's not at all times, as long as it's most of the time. And if there's a ton of flashy stuff happening, sometimes it's almost sort of hidden by the flashy explosions everywhere. A hack and slash game in typical fashion, it has a weak or faster attack, and then it has a heavy or slower attack. You can charge up the heavy attack by holding one of the shoulder buttons. You can shoot with this little robot doohickey that's next to you. You can aim manually with the right analog stick, or you can just lock on, it'll shoot in the direction of the lock on. Some enemies will have temporary invincibility to the bullets, like these guys did, until you break their shields. And the bullets don't do a lot of damage, so they're not going to be your primary means of attack, unless you're just fighting weaker enemies. You'll notice right there I just did one of those dodges where the character almost seems like to split up into multiples. I will say I do appreciate that freedom of movement, but again, invisible walls can be frustrating. Some of the sound effects were pretty weak, actually, surprisingly. They didn't have that nice punch, that deep sound that you would expect for them, but maybe they'll get that resolved before the game is finally released. Some more sound engineering is necessary. Obviously, you can see here, big, flashy combat scenes. Did a dodge move right there. Not hard to do at all. In fact, they should probably tighten up those iframes so that's a little more difficult. Otherwise, or maybe, I'm playing on normal mode, maybe on the more difficult modes, they changed that. I didn't get a chance to test it yet. You do level up. I leveled up once, but I never bothered going into the menus to see what that meant. Your robot buddy there, I like how, like I said, you know, you can either do the lock-on or you can manually aim it. Although at times I felt like you just had to hold your finger on the shoot button just all the time. Felt a little unnecessary. Like maybe even an automatic mode might be too much, but it did feel a bit unnecessary. The music is pretty decent. There are some vocals in it that I wasn't a big fan of. They're not terrible. Like, you don't understand the vocals. It's like they're singing in some either unknown fake language or some language I don't recognize at all. It does have that kind of standard Japanese role-playing game, the JRPG style dialogue that's just a bit lame and simple. And like the characters, one of the characters, the male character that you don't play as, he says some really dumb things that just seem like really obvious. But that's the thing with JRPGs. Here's the final fight of the demo. I don't think I'm spoiling anything here. But yeah, it's typical for a Platinum game in many ways, but at the same time, I did like the presentation, and I am looking forward to the game. Not sure if I'll wait for the PC version or pick it up straight up off the PlayStation 4. What do you guys think? Have you played it yet? If so, leave your comments down below. Make sure to follow, subscribe, blah, 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 all that stuff, and I will see you guys next time.